Hi, I'm Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And this is episode 39. And whether you're watching on Torah Anytime or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, we're so happy to have you aboard. I mentioned in the last podcast that there was a young man who came to see me who's learning in Lakewood, and he says that he's marbitz this show to not just to his own school, but to other schools in Lakewood. And he asked for a shout out. So that's Avi Laniado. And he says to give a shout out to his friend Avraham Millet. So thanks for the support out there, everybody. It's certainly heartwarming. See how many people are listening and are participating. And the podcast this week is sponsored anonymously by a person who just gets hana. They said they listen to it when they travel and they enjoy it and they don't want their name mentioned, but the Mirza Hashem, the schus, should be for you and for your family and all good things. And this is obviously a special podcast because, when I explain the nature of the podcast some podcasts ago, which some people referred to as a rant, but I referred to as an explanatory discussion. Those, when I explain things and sometimes people think that I'm yelling. But anyway, I said, the nature of this show is amorphous. And I have had thus far 2 guests. Now, you could argue there was more than 2 guests because one of the guests was Fogelgarten from Australia and his boys, but there were more than one, but I count that as one guest. And of course, my son Yaakov. And now, this is in fact the 3rd guest on the Rabbi Orlofsky show. And what a schus it is for me to have this person with me. I'm going to give you a little background, just so you know what we're doing here. I figure this is the first podcast after Shavuos. Shavuos is Kabbalas HaTorah. And after we're Mekabel the Torah, we then have to put it into practice and turn it into reality. And I remember hearing an idea many years ago where Ve'ela HaMishpatim, right after Mamad Har Sinai, you come to Parshas Mishpatim. Now you're on this high of Matan Torah. You're on this unbelievable spiritual level. And what are we told? Don't punch your mom. Don't sleep with a cow. Don't steal and be sold as an avid. So it seems so small, but the answer is that Torah understands that at the end of the day we're human beings. And therefore the koyach of Torah is to be able to take us and form us into the people we're supposed to be. And I thought, what would be more appropriate than to take one of the pioneers in Torah education in Eretz Yisrael. Now, today, it is de rigueur that people come to Eretz Yisrael and sit and learn. It was not that way. When I came to learn here the first time in 1975, there were very few options available. And those options did not increase for many years. And I'm with Rabbi Yosef Granofsky, who I can honestly say I know I'm friendly with for more than 40 years. I made the cheshbon. And I say that so you appreciate how old he is. And he's one of my oldest friends. Also, I know him a long time. And he was one of the pioneers in Torah education, so that when I was in Long Island NCSY, there were people who used to come to me to try to, recruit for their yeshivas. And I would always ask them the same question. Why are you any different than Ohr David? Because Yeshiva Ohr David was the first one on the scene that was serving this type of a public. And if you're coming up with another yeshiva, you got to explain to me why we need this and why, Ohr David, which had been the gold standard for decades, shouldn't be the go-to place. But, people like the flavor of the month. And, I can tell you many, many fine mechanchim who have difficulty finding work today because people want young, people want new, people want that, and time-tested. Chinuch doesn't have the same. I don't know. I don't remember anybody in Panovich saying to Rav Shach, "You're just a little too old for the job. We're looking to bring in a young man, with a little more energy." So Baruch Hashem, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to speak to Rabbi Granosky, who is a pioneer in the field, and share this with everybody, because not everybody understands. Open parentheses, I was at a Shabbaton years ago when Rav Stavsky Zatzal was at the Shabbaton. You remember Rav Stavsky? He was a Rav in Columbus, Ohio, but he built Columbus, Ohio. And he was just there with his family, his children, his grandchildren. No one really knew who he was. And I said, the reason there's Torah in America is because of people like Rabbi Stavsky who went into the hard rock and infertile land of America and managed to make Torah grow. The same thing is true about Americans being able to learn in Eretz Yisrael. There were pioneers like Rabbi Granosky who were able to do that. So, without any further ado, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome, Rabbi Orlofsky, to the... We've been mistaken sometimes. When we went to Yeshiva, there was a Roshovsky and a Orlofsky, and Rabbi Granovsky to the Rabbi Orlofsky show. So nice to have you on board.
Nice to be here.
So, what drove you to do? You know, I knew a fellow who was married to a Rosh Yeshiva's daughter, and he says there's three reasons to become a Rosh Yeshiva. One is you want Talmidim. The second one is you get paid more as a Rosh Yeshiva than a Rebbe, and the third is for the covet. And if not for the third reason, the other two aren't good enough. Now, I've always told you, you just wanted to be a Rosh Yeshiva for the covet.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the covet.
So what made you decide to do this? What drove you into the arms of the Rosh Yeshiva's life?
I was learning in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim in Yerushalayim, and they needed a Rebbe to give the first year. So Rabbi Moshe Chait, Rabbi Avram Kanerik.
How'd you end up in Chavetz Chaim, by the way?
That's another story, but okay.
We got time.
I ended up into Chavetz Chaim. I graduated Yeshiva University.
But you didn't go to Yeshiva High School.
No, I went to Yeshiva University.
You grew up like in Canada, no?
In Canada. I went to public
Montreal.
Montreal.
That's even worse than Canada.
In those days, it wasn't like it is today, but okay. I went to public high school. I went to Yeshiva University because there was really very few things for kids with little background to go to. And I was very successful. I learned in JSS, then I went to the Yeshiva program. And when I wanted to graduate, I wanted to learn Eretz Yisrael. Some of my friends were doing that. And some people I knew in Eretz Yisrael were in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim.
What were your options?
And
here you were coming out of Yeshiva University. You wanted to learn Eretz Yisrael. What were your choices?
There were three things on my table.
Right.
There were four, but one wasn't really a thing. There was Shalavim, Kerem V'Yavne, Itri, and Chavetz Chaim.
Wow.
And that was it. There was the Gush Etzion and HaKotel were just starting an American program that year also. But I didn't know that. I knew people went to Shalavim and Kerem V'Yavne, so I was on the cheshbon. So I had some friends in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, and I had a Rebbe in YU, Rabbi Yehuda Parnas, said you'll learn how to learn a Chavetz Chaim if you don't get too caught up in the method.
If you ever leave.
And I went to Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, and I fell in love with it, and I stayed there for many years.
What was the appeal?
What was the?
Now, you had learned already in Yeshiva University, so you'd been exposed to other methods of learning.
The appeal was that Rabbi Parnas said you'll really learn how to learn it there.
Yeah, but what did you came into Chavetz Chaim?
Yeah, so
bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
So I came with that intent, and I really liked the method of learning, and I really felt I was understanding things to a different depth than I was understanding it before. And the exposure to the whole idea of Mussar, which was a very new thing. I had learned the Mitzvah Sharm when I was away. People said, go read the Mitzvah Sharm, which I read, didn't speak to me. Then I went to Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, and it was a Mussar Seder, and all of a sudden, the Mitzvah Sharm became a different sefer.
No.
And I was very moved by the Rebbeim. Then finally, after my year in Eretz Yisrael, I went to the Forest Hills in those days, and I fell in love with the Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal, and that kept me there for a long time. When the Yeshiva came in 1977 to Eretz Yisrael, I came with them, and I didn't want to leave so fast. So when I stayed that year, I stayed and gave a shir. They needed a Rebbe, and I was the Rebbe.
Wow.
Okay, and I was quite successful. I was doing it for 2 years. And I took a year, it's another story which I'm not going to go into now, but I took a year off to learn Yoreh Day after my 2 years. And with my chavros was Reb Chaim Flum.
You wanted to become a rabbi?
I wanted to get smicha for whatever. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
You get a discount on your phone, at least you used to.
And so I was learning Yoreh Day, and well, the guys that were in my shir, the previous year, those kind of guys were lost in Yeshiva Chovos Chaim, and they were bothering me a whole day. I was trying to learn, and they were coming over all day and speaking to me and sitting down with me, and I didn't know what to do. And
Why were these boys in Chovos Chaim in the first place?
There were, just you pointed out, there are very few options for kids coming from to, and then Chovos Chaim was an option. It was an English-speaking place, and they're very nice, friendly. So that was a very good option. But Chovos Chaim was not geared for these kind of guys. When I gave shir, I was more able to relate. They brought in somebody to give the shir I was giving, who was definitely a bigger Talmud Chacham than me, but he couldn't relate to these kind of guys. So one point in the middle of the year, I went to Moshe Zatzal, and I said, you're not doing anything for these guys. You have to do something for them. He says, you do it. And I didn't know what that meant, but I started doing it. And for Baruch Hashem, for almost 40 years, that's what I've been doing.
Wow. So, who is the target audience? What is the Ohr David Bacher?
The real Ohr David Bacher is a kid who has experienced yeshiva high school, but for whatever reasons never really took off in the learning and in all the things, and he's missing a little more attention. Part of the problem they have in yeshivas today is the yeshivas are geared to the outstanding talmidim. That's 20% of the class, and the other 80% is totally lost. And even though among the 80% there's bright talmidim that are good, but they may lack certain basics. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just get these guys.
Now, this is a radical thing you're saying, because I've been told many times, if you want a Beis yeshiva, you have to pretend you're an Aleph yeshiva, or Beis students won't want to go to you. Because Beis students want to go to what they think is an Aleph yeshiva, and if you think you're a Beis yeshiva, then the Dalet boys come. Have you found that to be true?
To a degree, yes. But the truth is, the Metzias, what's going on really in America is there are many kids like that, especially from the more yeshivish places. I have to mention that part of my success was the year I was developing the idea. Rabbi Moshe Meiselman was on sabbatical from Yula. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in Yula. He was on sabbatical.
I was in LA then.
And I knew he was a well-known mechanech. And as the idea was developing, I spoke to him, and he helped me pinpoint things I want to do, and because of him, I was able to get 5 talmidim in my first year, his graduates. And the truth is, that's another kind of kid I wanted. In other words, I wanted kids from more yeshiva backgrounds, but a kid from Yula or less yeshivish schools that would not fit into the regular yeshivas would be also ideal students. And the truth is, some of those kids ended up in Shalavim and Kerem B'Yavna. They were totally lost, and we give them the attention that they needed.
And yet, you used to go to NCSY to recruit, which is exactly the opposite of what you're talking about.
NCSY had in it in those days, and a little less than...
You were in NCSY?
Yes, I was in NCSY.
NCSY Canada?
Yes. It was Eastern Canada in those days.
Its own region, Eastern Canada. Yeah. It'll make you feel at home. Iceberg!
There's an NCSY product that is really lost in yeshivas in those days. He was a kid from public school, but he had been at NCSY for 4 or 5 years. He was doing all the mitzvahs. He was learning a little bit, and he was not a Baal Tshuva in that sense, but he didn't have the learning background. So those kids fit right into our Daven, into lower shir, but they were stars. Those kids were always stars.
And which is an amazing thing, because your model that you described is not made for those kids. And yet I know kids who came in who couldn't read.
So all we had to do was at a lower shir, that's when we practiced reading, and I'm not sure if this reflects on what yeshiva high schools do, but in a few months the kids were on the same level as kids who went to yeshivas most of their life.
Amazing. Now, you said that one of the things that attracted you to Chovos Chaim was their study of Mussar. What was wrong with you? Because it's a W in the yeshivas. When there's a Mussar shmuz, everybody walks out. Now, I know from personal experience, the Chovos Chaim was the opposite. I was talking to a guy once, and I said, they tell a joke. They say, in another yeshiva, during Mussar Seder, they learn Mishnah Berurah. And in Chovos Chaim, during Mishnah Berurah Seder, they learn Mussar. So a guy says to me, it's funny you say that. I saw the most amazing Mussar Haskel in the Mishnah Berurah the other day. Now, who's attracted to Mussar? I mean, Mussar is a bad word. Mussar is, I'm going to yell at you, I'm going to tell you you're bad, I'm going to tell you, your shortcomings.
So I think that the way the Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal presented Mussar, it was very well taken. In other words, Mussar was a way to prove yourself. In other words, it wasn't pointing out where you were bad, it was pointing out how good I could be. And I guess that's Slobodka, Gadlos Ha'adam. But how good could you be? And look, if I just think about it a little more, I'll be a little bit better. And the improvement is very clear, your own improvement, and the connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom and to learning changes.
I tell you, it's interesting you say that because of the connection with the Rosh Yeshiva. I used to teach in a program called Ola Golah, where I would train rabbis who were going out into the field how to answer basic questions. And more than once, I would say, I can give over the answer you said, but I can't do that little laugh you do at the end where you go, and that seals the deal. So I said, the reason it seals the deal is because all it's saying is, I actually believe in what I'm saying. So that in order for Mussar to work, the person who's giving it over has to be able to epitomize the concept of Mussar. Otherwise, I'm telling you things that have no shaykhs, you have no role model, you have no place to see it.
That's who he was. If I can divert for a second, I read a very interesting article in the Yetted, from what I say, about.
You can mention the Yetted.
It was about.
Someone sang a song and they include the mishpacha, so you could do anything you want on this podcast.
It was it was a biography sort of Meir Chodesh, that's all. And the story is a simple story. Rav Hutner was sitting Shiva for his wife. And Rav Meir Chodesh was there, and Rav Shlomo Zalbi was there, and different Rosh Yeshivas were there. And somebody mentioned to Rav Hutner, do you remember that time that the elder yelled at him in public very much? And we're talking about that. So Rav Zalbi said that if a shkiach would speak to a Talmud like that, I would have no Talmidim. And Rav Meir Chodesh said, the reason that Mishkiach can't do it today, because we realized that the Alter really loved us. And whatever he said, we knew he really loved us. As long as the love was there, you could say what he wanted. And I would say, very similar to the Rosh Yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva was not a charismatic speaker. He was not a very great speaker. He wasn't a charismatic personality. I mean, his learning was very good if you had the patience to learn it. And his Mussar was good if you had to listen to it. But I think that the fact that we knew he loved us so much made the whole difference.
That's the biggest problem with the Mussar movement, is that, to my mind, it's the same problem with the psychologist. In order to be a good psychologist, you have to have a natural chush and a chachma. So then you can learn methodology and learn how to apply it. But if you don't have that natural chush, so you can read all the books, you can do it, but you're going to miss the main point. I feel it's the same thing with a mashkiach or a bal Mussar, that in order to be effective, you have to have that natural ability to be able to understand people, and then you can use all the Mussar techniques to be able to use it. Otherwise, you'll come up with the wrong conclusions.
Yeah, I think part of the natural ability is concern and care.
So, it's been said by bigger people than me that the Mussar movement is dead. Can you still teach Mussar to this generation?
The way we teach Mussar is we learn it either we learn this farm, but the Rebbeim have to. I always tell them a practical example. How does this apply to me? What is Mr. Sherm saying to me? He's not speaking to the greatest tzaddik. He's speaking to somebody like me. How does it apply? How does it affect me? And if you make the applications, and as you just said, if the applications apply to all of us, including me when I'm as the Rebbe learning Mussar and to the Talmud learning Mussar, and I feel that applies to me, I think that goes over to the Talmud also.
So can you make bachurim today into Mentsch? Because correct me if I'm wrong. You're in this business. How old is Ohr David?
39 years.
39 years. Have you noticed a change in the quality of the bachur of those 39 years?
Yes. And I try not to notice it.
Have you ever noticed, I don't know if you've ever done this, you go back to your high school and you look at the graduating classes who were your age when they were graduating, I mean back in the 50s, and they all look like your grandparents. So there's a different mitzias of a bachur today. Like, first of all, what changed? And second of all, how do you bring across, how can you take this person and turn him in from a goylem, and I mean goylem in the sense of the halachic sense of an unfinished kli. Those of you who are familiar with Taurus, of course, you've never seen it because you're a Chavetz Chaim. But you take a goylem and turn it into a kli. I think there used to be at least some amount of of preparation that was done in the home and that was done in the schools, And I've spoken to high schools where they say our whole goal is just to get them to Eretz Yisrael. That's the entire purpose of 4 years of high school is to get them to Eretz Yisrael and let them make a Mentsch out of him. Let them do something with him. So what's the change you've seen over these 40 years? And how do you work with the product that's in front of you now?
I mean, first of all, the most drastic change is not 40 years, about 10 years. It's the phones. And to get anybody's attention, even if they're not on the phone, is very difficult today.
Can it be outlawed?
In Yeshivas Ohr David, we don't outlaw it because it'll just be cat and mouse.
Right.
I outlawed in the base Medrash, but it's part of the guy's lives. So their life is centered around the phone. And all the things that psychologists say is true, that they're not so interactive with people, and they're not so social, and it's really true. And part of what we have to do is to break that. And part of it is the fact that not in the base Medrash. Part of it is to talk to guys one-on-one. It's part of it is we do a lot of tours, we do a lot of tiyulim, we do a lot. It has to be bring them in, talk to them. And once they get involved, it's much easier.
Right, but when you take them on a tiyul, so they're sitting on the bus and they're all playing on their phones.
And sometimes I don't even want to go off the but if you encourage
look, the kotel. Oh, yeah.
It's really the problem today. But the more the Rebbe can get the guys involved, the more we can be successful. I wish I could say that every last guy is successful, but Baruch Hashem, there are guys who are very successful.
There's no way to turn back the clock with the phones.
No, I don't think so. And to answer the phones, it doesn't really work too well because then you have wherever I used to find the wrong stuff, I find the phones. If you answer them, so. But you got to work with the guys, and I think if you pay attention to them and they see there might be a life outside the phone, that'll help.
But that's the main change. In other words, when you look at bachurim,
when you look at the change
from 30 years ago to 20 years ago to 10 years ago, they were mostly the same.
That's the most drastic change. The other change, obviously, is the lack of morals in the society, which affects everybody. You say, the kid's in yeshiva, it doesn't really affect them. You're exposed to all kinds of things that we grew up in. I grew up in Canada, and I was a regular teenager, a regular person. But some of the stuff you're exposed to today, when you walk down the street, and certainly with the television, what they show on television today, is way beyond anything I would see in movies in those days. So you're exposed to everything, and that's it's much harder to get through the guys.
But you feel it's possible?
With a lot of diligence, and yes. And unfortunately, I don't think we're as successful as we used to be, but Baruch Hashem, there is success.
So let's say we take a bachar. What's success? Define success.
It depends on the bachar, that's for sure. You can't say the success is the same for everybody. But
sure you can. Everybody does.
But it's not impossible to say that. My minimum success...
I want to tell a Rabbi Granofsky story from 30 years ago. Yeah? Rabbi Dr. I know you'll correct me if I have the story wrong, but this is how I remember the story. Rabbi Dr. Avram Tversky said there are two types of yeshivas and seminaries in Israel. Those that have a drug problem and those that don't know they have a drug problem. So you organized a meeting at his instruction of all the yeshivas to say, how do we deal with the problem of drugs? And yeshiva number 1 said, we don't have a problem. Yeshiva number 2 said, neither do we. And everybody else said, us either. So obviously, when we say we're going to deal with each person individually, it's not really true, right? There's a square hole, and the goal is to turn everybody into a square peg and fit them into that square peg. I mean, that's how I've seen education, certainly with my own children and certainly in the world in general, that everybody... I was having this discussion with a mashgiach once who was throwing out a kid because he was coming late and he was caught back playing soccer. I don't know why. I was going to throw the kid out. So I said, you're the mashgiach. You understand that your job is to work with the bacher. So let's discuss how we're going to help this boy. No, there's nothing to talk about. We're throwing him out. I said, no. You're like the Alter, like Rabbi Yerucham, you understand the kaiches of a bacher, and you're going to figure out what to do. Now, if you want, you can talk to the Rosh Yeshiva. That's not the Rosh Yeshiva's job. That's your job to figure out how to get through to every bacher. The Rosh Yeshiva's job is to teach him Torah. Yours is to figure out how to work with him. I told him, it was an Israeli, I said, in English we have an expression, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem is a nail. So everybody tends to look at everything from this extremely narrow thing. And you're saying, I have a yeshiva of 50 boys, and I have 50 goalposts set up. I have 50 finish lines for each one of these kids.
Unfortunately, that's what you have to do. We can't. I mean, I would like.
Why is that unfortunate?
I would like to say.
Chanoch l'nao b'darko.
I would like to
that's a
say
great
that everybody to yeshiva and continue, but it doesn't work like that. Some guys will never be convinced. The minimal goal is that everybody should be more connected to Limud Torah, more connected, and some guys will be very connected. Some guys will be a little. But at least let them go to shir once a week. Let them do that. I want them to feel a connection to Eretz Yisrael and a certain connection to Am Yisrael. That's my goal, and I think pretty much we're successful in that.
Can you point to a kid and say, this kid is a failure?
Over the years, there were failures. Kids didn't marry. There one or two kids that didn't marry. That's a failure, I would say. A kid who won't send his kids to yeshiva, send them to public school is a failure. That's pretty rare, but it does happen.
It's a rough world out there. So see if this connects to your experiences. I have bachurim over my house at my Shabbos table. And, sometimes I'm a little more animated. Usually it's in the winter, and Shabbos a little earlier. So I'll ask questions. Now I just sort of sit there in a half daze, and I start, going to sleep already right after the soup. But I'll ask them, what yeshiva are you in? XYZ. And then I say, why did you choose that yeshiva? Once I met a bacher, he happened to be my nephew, who went to a particular yeshiva, even though his Rebbe could have got them into brisk. I said, why'd you go there? And he says, because it was the best place for my learning. In all the years I'm asking this question, that's the only person I'll give him a shout out. That's my nephew Rabbi Orlofsky. He's a big tzaddik. I don't know if he watches this because he's so busy, learning and busy with his children and things. I don't know if he has time for this, but I'll give him a shout out anyway. Yeah, but I was the only time. The answers I usually get is either that's where my friends are going, or it's got a good name. That's it. But I never hear anybody say, I'm choosing this yeshiva because this is the best place for my learning.
I think that most kids, when they graduate high school, are not really thinking of that. Especially the kids that come to our David. Learning it's nice to learn, but that's not where I'm going for sure.
So what's your appeal when you go to a bacher? I'll tell you a story. I used to work for David, and I remember on one of my first recruiting trips. So in November, the planes are filled with Rosh Yeshiva and representatives of Yeshiva flying back and forth across America trying to recruit bachurim. So a couple of them felt bad for me. I was new at this, and they say, I'll give you a piece of advice. Whatever you do, don't tell the boys they're going to change. Nobody wants to hear they're going to change, which I find astounding. So I walked into the next school, and I told the story. And I said, if you think you're going to spend a year learning Torah in Eretz Yisrael and not change, that we don't send you back at the end of the year as a better Jew, as a better person, as a better son, as a potentially better husband and father, then we didn't do our job. I got no boys. You know what? They were right. Nobody wants to change. Nobody wants to think about their future in that way.
That's true. When they come also, we have to be very gentle how to approach that.
So what's your appeal? You go to a boy, and you say, come to Yeshiva Ohr David.
And I think the main appeal that we have, and not everybody appreciates it, is we'll spend time with, we'll try to find your needs and deal with them. And I really do that. Whether that sells all the time is a different question.
When I was in NCSY, we used to make Shabbatonim, and we tried to get in secular people. And the way we did this was essentially by lying. That's what we did. So we say, you want to come to a Shabbaton? He says, what is it? Oh, it's a really fun weekend. He says, well, what are we going to do? We have a band. Now, that's true. Saturday night for 2 hours, we have a band. We left out, the other 34 hours of the shows. Because if I tell people, well, we're going to pray, and then we're going to eat, and then we're going to dance, boys with boys, girls with girls, and then we're going to pray, and then we're going to have Torah classes, and then we're going to eat, and then we're going to sing, and then we'll get up in the morning and we're going to pray for a very, very long time, and then we're going to eat, and then we're going to dance, and we're going to, what do you say? It's just not going to go. So unfortunately, I would misrepresent. I don't say unfortunately. I say put it straightforward. I'm proud misrepresenting because it's a Gemara Mefurish, Shabbos. You never saw it. You went to Chavetz Chaim. But it's not one of the 8 Masechtas. But a person comes to Hillel, says, I'll convert if you can make me the Kohen Gadol. He says, sure, no problem, come on in. Yeah, it was a misrepresentation, but he was confident of his product, and I figured if I could get him in, I would do it, When I taught in Aisha Torah, I was giving this beginner's class, and there's this one guy who's just like fuming the whole class, And afterwards I said to him, what's the matter? He goes, I met this guy at the wall, I think his name was Meir Schuster. I said to him, how do I get to the central bus station? He says, come with me. The next thing I know, I was sitting in this classroom. I said, oh, I'm really sorry. He goes, no, I actually really enjoyed it. And I think he stayed for a while, So if you are going to present things, and it could be that, the best thing is not necessarily what the person themselves is going to want.
That's for sure true. And selling the product is not always that easy. And you sell trips to around, and you sell that's a nice place, and the food is good, and you'll get attention. And we try and make it work.
So, Rabbi Granovsky, speak to the American bacher who's watching this. And by the way, I have a very large audience of American bacher. And there are those who are going to be coming to Eretz and are going to be considering their options, and tell them why they should consider Ohr David. What you're going to tell them this yeshiva has to offer you personally is.
First, I'm going to say that if you're a bacher who's going to go to Panovich or Hebron or any strong yeshiva, don't come to Ohr David. I don't want you. But if you're a bacher who wants to learn, who needs a little more help to get there, a bacher who wants to connect to Rebbeim, a bacher who wants to connect to Eretz Yisrael, and a bacher who wants direction for life, I think we're a great place. We'll work with you, we'll find your needs, we'll direct you, and I think it really can make serious differences in your life.
Okay, I disagree completely. Because you have these bachurim who come to Eretz Yisrael and go to big yeshivas. I'm not going to mention any by name. They go to big yeshivas, and they decided the ripe old age, 21, they don't need a Rebbe anymore. They don't need any hadracha. They don't need anybody to build them. I think that's a mistake. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman was already Rosh Yeshiva and gave it up to become a Talmud of the Chavetz Chaim. Yeah, Rav Itzel Blazer was the Rav of St. Petersburg, the capital of all the Russias, and he gave it up to become a Talmud of Rabbi Yisrael Salanta. So I think that tell a bacher, you could go sit in the base medrash, no Rebbe's going to look at you, no one's going to talk to you. You know how many bachurim I've met who they met the Rosh Yeshiva at their chasana because he insisted on being Masada Kedushin, and he asked someone to point him out. So you're going to tell a strong bacher going to a strong yeshiva that he doesn't need a Rebbe and he doesn't need hadracha?
I think he does need a Rebbe, he does need hadracha, but I think that the Ohr David experience...
And you're going to get that in Kol Torah?
No, but I think the Ohr David experience is beyond what he needs, so he has to find the yeshiva that'll do that. And
are there yeshivas that do that?
Maybe.
Then maybe it's time to create or David Elyon.
You brought up a topic very interesting. I just had a discussion with two bachurim that one was.
This kills me, by the way. This is one of the things that kills me.
One bacher was biased 3 years. One bacher was biased 2 years. They're mitzuyonim. They learn. They're very dedicated. And I told them, okay, it's time to move on in life. And I said, you're the son of Hashual. The Rosh Hashual. You're the head of the fox. It's time to be son of Ari, to be the tail of the lion. So they came back to me and said they couldn't find the lion. And they went to different yeshivas, and they said they were nice, there was learning, but they didn't feel that the yeshiva was working with the Talmidim. They didn't feel a connection, they didn't want to stay. And the truth is, I never used to hold on to bachurim after 2 years, and this one was bachurim by 2 years, and wants to come for a third, this was third, he wants to come for fourth. And I really don't know what to say, because they say there's certain things they're going to get here that we're not going to get someplace else, and they're probably right.
I know another yeshiva that has a very fine reputation that was also basically 2 years, and they extended it 3 or 4 years because they said, where am I going to send them?
That's my problem.
You know how many chasanas I've gone to where the Masada Kedushin was a high school Rebbe? Because that was the last Rebbe he had a kesher with? anyway, like I say, from the time I was an NCSY regional director and I had the opportunity to send bachurim to Ohr David, I have admired the Rabbi Granosky's work, and what can I tell you? There's, for those of you who don't remember this very, very black period of history, you were in Eretz Yisrael already, so you may not remember it, but it was such a black. I think about it now, and I still get cold sweats. Coke decided to change their formula, and they came out with new Coke. You didn't know about this?
I know about it. Yeah.
And it was horrible. And people were hoarding old Coke. There were people who, like, their gas stations, if you fill up, we'll give you a can of real Coke. And eventually they went back to the classic. I'm a big believer in the classics. I think that, the ability to be able to teach it the way, and I heard this story from Rabbi Chait, I'm sure you heard it too, that Rabbi David wanted to hire a Rebbe, and this Rebbe sent to Rabbi David Leibowitz, the founder of Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, his resume, and he added in, and I speak English, so I can relate to the bachurim. Now, obviously, this was a time when everybody in America spoke Yiddish. You speak Yiddish.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I can say, yeah. And is a shver matzav. But anyway, David looked at this and said, I don't speak English. Does that mean I can't relate to the bachurim? So what can I tell you? There's a universality to people. People remain the same. Technology changes, society changes, but people are always the same. So that's it. It was a privilege for me to be able to have Rabbi Granofsky with me, a friend of decades, and I am an admirer of his work and all the good things that he does. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about this show, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast. If you want to make a comment on this particular episode, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast/39. If you want to find out about upcoming events, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/events. If you want to contact Rabbi Orlofsky, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/contact. If you want to sponsor an episode of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast and click on the sponsor an episode. And if you want more information about Yeshiva Ohr David,
go on to Ohr David, ohrdavid.org, right?
That's a website.
A website.
That is a website.
That's easy.
Those of you who have technologically passed over websites. OHR David.
Yeah. .org.
When I was working for Ohr David, I went to rent a car once, and they said, "What's your name?" I said, "David Orlofsky." And they said, "What's your company?" I said, "Ohr David." They said, "Oh, that's very clever." But it wasn't really named for me. Anyway, that's it for this week. I'm David Orlofsky, and I want to thank our special guest, Rabbi Yosef Granofsky. And this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.